Welcome to False Claims, Real Consequences.
Welcome to False Claims, Real Consequences, the podcast that gives truth tellers the tools they need to protect themselves and the public. I'm John Clements. I'm joined by attorney Stephen Teller, a nationally recognized whistleblower lawyer with a proven track record in False Claims Act, PPP, and customs fraud cases. Today we're covering whistleblowing, so if you've seen something unethical or illegal at work, this episode will help you understand your rights, your risks, and your next step. So this is Meet Your Advocate, why whistleblower law matters more than ever. So Steve, first of all, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much, John. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, what an important topic to cover. I'm glad we're here to have this conversation, get some things out in the open. So let's just dive in. So my first question for you would be, you've built a reputation around representing whistleblowers in high stakes fraud cases. So that's a pretty specific niche. How did you get into that area of law?
Well, actually I've been doing employment law, discrimination and retaliation and whistleblowing issues for 30 years. And all along the way, I've been interested in this False Claims Act side of it, where there's fraud against the federal government and people are able to get a whistleblower reward for turning that in and letting the government know about it. And then about 3 or 4 years ago, I decided, I'd really like to focus on the False Claims Act. And yeah, that's been the story. Just been focused there as much as I can.
Oh,
it's
so
a pleasure.
what was it? Yeah, what was it 3 or 4 years ago that caused you to make that turn? Was it just a gradual thing, or was it like a specific case or story that you ran across?
Well, it was early COVID, and I got a call from a guy who was aware of a large cable company in Alaska that was mischarging the government. But that was a large case, and it was very interesting. And I just enjoyed, again, learning a new subject matter area, because every time you have to learn about, what is it that your client is an expert in, and report that pretty clearly to the government. So I think that was probably the turning point.
Okay, cool. And I do want to dig into some of the specifics, because when you come across a term like whistleblower, that's something that me, an average Joe, I see in a headline in a newspaper, or maybe I see on a movie or a TV show. I don't really know what it is. I just think it's something important, I think. So from a legal standpoint, what is a whistleblower, and how is that different from simply, raising a workplace concern?
Yeah, I mean, there isn't like a standard definition of whistleblower across all of the different kinds, I'll call them, of whistleblowers, right? I mean, if you
Mhm.
said, hey, boss, stop touching my butt, right? At some level, you're a whistleblower
Cool.
because you're opposing discrimination. But when I say whistleblower, what I really mean is a person who's aware of some kind of misconduct or fraud by their usually private company, but also in government, who says either to the boss or to an outside entity, there's a problem here and we need to make it stop. So it's really kind of a working definition as opposed to a legal definition. That legal definition is going to be different for, depending on if I work in the nuclear industry or in a mine, or in if I'm blowing the whistle on fraud against the government, or, some consumer protection issue, what exactly I need to do or be to be a whistleblower is really context dependent.
So let's talk about as well. I'm curious to know what types of misconduct or fraud are actually protected under whistleblower statutes like the False Claims Act.
It is still a broad question, right? Because I know so much about employment law that the whistleblower piece is the person who's trying to oppose something that's going wrong, right? So if you're at work and there's a workplace safety issue, or in healthcare, a patient safety issue, or if there's fraud against the government or customers, or even something specific like you're supposed to do jury duty, all of those things are in the category that I call whistleblowing, because they're not directly civil rights related, like retaliation for complaining about discrimination. So, I feel like I'm in a semantic loop here where, what really matters is like, when should a person decide that the right thing to do is to say, hey, boss, there's a problem? And I think the answer to that is when you're really sure that there's a problem. When you know that there's a law or a regulation or even an ethical standard that says we can't do that, and when you bring it up gently, you're told to do it anyway or hide the evidence. Those would be situations where, wow, talking to a lawyer about it before taking a next step would probably be wise, because it might be protected or it might not. I mean, there's a lot of things that people think, I did the right thing here. Why am I getting in trouble at work? And they might not be illegal.
I do appreciate that answer because, like you said, if I'm being asked to do something that I don't believe is ethical or what have you, and I'm being told to do it anyway, like that to me is like, all right, that makes sense to me. Like that's an issue. You want to take care of that.
Well, and I think one of the super obvious things should be for an employer when, the worker comes up and says, or the executive worker, whatever, at any level, the employee comes up and says, hey, I think there's something wrong here. The answer should be either, yeah, you're right, let's look at it, or no, you're wrong, and here's why you're wrong. The law actually says this, so this is why we don't need to worry about it. And the thing that always gives me pause is when they say, you don't need to know, just do the thing that I said. Because if they're not going to explain to you why your concern is wrong, well, maybe there's a reason why they're not explaining. Of course, maybe the reason could be they're just too busy right now, but that should be the answer. I'd love to explain it to you. I'm too busy right now. Let's set up a time next week. I've got 15 minutes for you. Here's a memo from our legal department, whatever it is. They should be able to explain. If you're saying, hey, boss, I don't think we should drive the hazardous materials truck through the national forest, that's an issue, isn't it? And the boss, can't say why it's really okay to do that. Then you should be checking around, do some Google searches and then maybe call a lawyer if the answer is, yeah, we're not supposed to do that.
Yeah, and I think those are really great examples. So now it's starting to click in my head. So thank you for that. Now it's starting to be like, oh, okay, now I kind of get it. And I do want to talk about something you mentioned briefly about retaliation, because, if let's say I'm in a position where I think I need to bring an issue up and I am afraid about being retaliated against, like, what are my protections that I have under the law?
If you are raising an issue and you're feeling like what's happening is some kind of disciplinary action, or suddenly the boss seems angry at you, there's probably a legal protection for you if there's a law violation. But I really have to say the answer to that one is on a case-by-case basis. What's the right thing to do? Do I go to the regulatory agency directly? Do I maybe create an email chain that doesn't look like I'm memorializing the conversation, but I still am? Do I text my best friend and say, I can't believe my boss told me to do this today? That's creating some evidence that proves the facts. I mean, the legal protections really depend on the context a lot. And this is one area that, could be clarified in our laws, right? But again, if I'm in the nuclear regulatory sphere, then I probably need to go to the Department of Energy with a administrative complaint that says, I'm feeling like here are the details of my discrimination. If I'm working for private industry and they fire me, well, I need to get a lawyer and look at whether filing a lawsuit is the right thing to do. If I'm in private industry and they're hassling me and starting to document my performance, I think talking to a lawyer right away is a good idea, because we need to manage that, to push back with what we call protected activity and create some documentation of what's happening. So there's a full range of, talk to a lawyer, do some self-help. Maybe the lawyer writes a demand letter that says, hey, I've been wrongfully terminated. Maybe there's big fraud against the government where the next thing to do is to file a False Claims Act lawsuit under seal and try to stay employed just to keep the income coming in. Or maybe there's an administrative agency that you can bring the complaint to and hope that bringing notice that way will start to solve the problem.
Okay, so I think the big takeaway for me from this is, if I'm in a situation where I'm suspecting something, I might need to say something to someone, it's probably not the worst thing in the world to just pick up the phone and call a lawyer and just ask.
I got to say that's right. I mean, experienced employment lawyers have seen a lot of situations. And so, and unfortunately, you often have to pay for a consultation, and 500 or $600 out of pocket to, get an hour's worth of really good advice. That's a great deal. The problem is you can't really know like who's going to be good at it and who's
Yeah.
just kind of screening for, do you have a contingency fee case? So I often recommend to people you just call a bunch of lawyers. There's usually some good online, directories. You call one, listen to them, make some notes, call another. Plan on spending a few hours just talking to them on the phone for free until you hear who kind of meshes with your style, who's listening to you, who's affordable, who you think would be efficient, who's experienced.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good. Yeah, that's really good advice. You should shop around a little bit. Yeah, see who, because this is going to be potentially your partner moving forward. So, yeah, make sure that relationship is there.
Yep. And you can gain information by talking to lawyers. If you get through to me, I'm going to spend 5 or 10 minutes at least trying to head you in the right direction. And, maybe half an hour, next week to try to get into the details.
Yeah, and so along with that, let's say I'm in a position where I don't think about or I choose not to call some lawyers to get some advice, and I'm trying to report fraud. Like, what are some common missteps people make when they try to basically go it alone without talking to, legal counsel like yourself?
Well, I've seen people quit too soon. That's probably the number one problem. I would definitely talk to a lawyer before you decide to quit a job. I think there's a real advantage in gathering documentation without raising red flags. So depending on your company, you can sometimes, forward your emails to your personal account. Other times you need to take, photos with your cell phone of, the email. One more thing that's really important when you're trying to decide what to do and you're faced with a whistleblower type problem is figuring out, really how important is this? Is it something that I'm willing to, get fired over? And are there big dollars involved? Or is there somebody's health or safety involved? And making those choices, as much as I hate to say it, making those choices carefully so that you don't end up losing your job over the fact that there's some small harm to a large number of people that you could have maybe solved without abruptly quitting or something like that.
Yeah, and I will say I used to work in I'm just going to say a highly regulated industry with a lot of people who've been there for a long time. And yeah, maybe your experience might be coloring a situation and it's maybe not as bad or not as good as you think.
That's right. That's right. I mean, you can have your employer can be saying, we need to do this exactly this way. And it turns out that the law allows them to do it a little bit differently. And they haven't put it into the policies yet that they're going to make a small change. But the change that's been made isn't important enough. The agency isn't going to take it seriously. I don't want you to get crosswise with management over something that doesn't matter to the bigger picture.
Yeah, and having been in the industry a long time, I definitely saw that where it's like, dude, just chill out, man. Like it's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's so hard to know when it's okay. I remember
Yeah.
talking to a guy, the bolts in this product are too long. They could be rubbing on electrical cables that, are going by them. It took me hours to pull that out of him. Like, what is the actual danger here? Just because the process is violated doesn't mean everyone else is going to take it as seriously. So you got to be thoughtful about the big picture and what's the actual harm that we're trying to prevent.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a great note to end on for today's episode anyway. So Steve, thank you so much for coming on, explaining this. Again, it's an important topic. People need to know about it. I appreciate you bringing your expertise to it.
I'm happy to help. Thanks for asking.
That's it for today's episode of False Claims, Real Consequences. And hey, if you want to reach out to Steve, visit stellarlaw.com. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this episode so we can just get this information to the people who need it. And with that, I hope you have a great day.
Thanks, John.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.